And it was an evolution of putting together mechanics in the ring, psychology about a match, learning how to cut a promo, learning how to affect people's emotions, and finally, you know, hey, I hit it pretty hot. At my hottest, I think I was probably one of the biggest draws in the history of the business.
I want to take things back to the very beginning first, specifically the 88 Hyundai Electra days, the paying dues and sacrifice days. I just want to hear about what that whole process was like for you, because it seems like most people, especially in business, are really focused on instant gratification now. And I want to just hear about, the importance of paying dues and what that was like for you.
Man, you hit the nail right on the head. Instant gratification doesn't happen in that business, not even today, in 2021. But, back in the day, I grew up in South Texas and got involved with athletics and football and stuff like that. And I fell in love with pro wrestling when I saw it on TV. And a football scholarship would end up taking me to the Dallas area. And, there was a sportatorium in Dallas, Texas, which is where the world famous Von Erichs were from, which is a very famous wrestling family, but specifically in Texas. The Von Erichs were gods. And I would go Friday nights and Saturday mornings as a college student, football player, and watch the matches. And then I got tired of school. And with 17 hours to graduate, I had a full ride. And I got 4.5 years of, free education. And I was done. I tapped out. And I was working on a freight dock, driving forklifts and, manual labor, picking up boxes and loading trucks. I saw a commercial for a wrestling school. And I said, hey, man, there's my foot in the door. And so I signed up for it. And I spent about 5 months down there learning. And after a couple of months of being there in Dallas as a very green rookie, you're always green at everything you do when you first started. And I talked to the promoter and I said, hey, man, when can I start working full time? And the guy said, Steve, you're ready now. And we'll send you down to Tennessee in 2 weeks. Man, 2 weeks later, I'm driving down to, Mid-South Coliseum, ready to have my first match in my 1988 Hyundai Excel. And those payments on that car were $154 a month. And we bought that car in Houston, Texas. And my older brother co-signed on that note for me because I didn't have any credit. And I couldn't, times were lean. But I couldn't let that car get repossessed because I wasn't going to ruin my brother's name or his credit. So anyway, long story short, I went down there and starved for a while, and it was some pretty lean times. And then finally got a paid grade when I went over to World Championship Wrestling in Atlanta. An injury over there, got fired, ended up in ECW, and then finally made my way to WWE. And one thing led to another, and it was an evolution of putting together mechanics in the ring, psychology about a match, learning how to cut a promo, learning how to affect people's emotions. And, finally, hey, I hit it pretty hot. At my hottest, I think I was probably one of the biggest draws in the history of the business. I didn't get into business to be one of the biggest draws in the history of the business. I just got in to be a pro wrestler, and it turned into what it turned into. But it was a long, winding road full of many pitfalls and, screw ups and, learning lessons along the way. So it did not come easy.
That's the other thing I wanted to talk to you about, because I feel like there's this big misconception around professional wrestling. It's all choreographed, it's all scripted top to bottom. And I've heard you say this before, how most of the stuff you were doing was ad-libbed and it was off the cuff. And yet you became one of the biggest draws in wrestling ever. So where do you think you developed that mastery and that ability to just come off the cuff and do what you did and do what you do and do it at such a high level?
Man, it was repetition after repetition. It was riding down the roads with all the veterans and, picking their brains and letting them, you're sitting under a learning tree. You absorb the information or you repel it. And I absorbed all of it. And also, when I first went out to Tennessee, I had one of my first matches. And when I came back, I thought I'd just lit the world on fire and just, revolutionize pro wrestling. Well, Dutch Mantel pulled me aside and cussed me out and told me how bad I sucked and told me to go watch all the matches, sitting in a steel chair. He goes, that's the only way you're going to learn this. So I watched a million matches, along the way. And, to this day, obviously pro wrestling, as they call it now, sports entertainment, it's just like a movie. It's not a true sport, although it was always, presented as one back in the day. But there ain't nothing easy about it, and there's nothing easy about anything in entertainment. I don't think it can become easy once you get good at it. But whether people think it's scripted or choreographed, you go out there and you do something to elicit a response. Based on that response, you proceed accordingly. And that was back in the old days when we called matches on the fly in the ring from listening to a crowd. As we've seen everything from football, baseball to everything speed up, so has the world of professional wrestling. And these days, guys kind of been working so long, they'll talk about things and they'll go out there and do it. But, it's a performance, and it's, you're trying to, it doesn't matter how many flips you can go out there and do. If you and me are out there working and you can't hurt me or I can't hurt you, who cares? And then if we're also working and we have a personal issue, then everybody cares about that. So we're telling stories out there, and you're either a good storyteller or you're not.
Yep. And the thing about your story that was, that was so captivating is the role of the anti-hero. And just growing up as a kid at that time, Stone Cold was my go-to. Every wrestling video game we play, every anything wrestling related, you were my go-to. And there was that rebellious nature, you going against Vince McMahon. And I feel like a lot of younger people and older people at that time really connected with that. And I wanted to know what your thoughts were on the importance of that character, because I think that that character was so important and still is so important. And prior to that, it wasn't really something that had as much of a spotlight on it. It was more squeaky clean, take your vitamins, you know, brush your teeth, say please and thank you. And then you came along. So why do you think that resonated with so many people?
Well, the saying your prayers and taking your vitamins, that was really big, and that worked for a long time. But finally, when that runs its course, it's time for a different flavor, and I certainly was a different flavor. And for a guy like me, really, if you kind of look at maybe what a parallel of me would have been 20 years before me was superstar Billy Graham. He was a villain, he was a heel, but he was kind of so cool and had this physique and he was good looking. People kind of liked him. But anyway, Bob Backlund beats him and then he goes off. Vince McMahon Sr. didn't know what to do with superstar Billy Graham back then because it hadn't been done yet. Along comes me, this disgruntled guy who'd been, through a few systems, but kind of restricted. And I really couldn't find myself. I was trying to emulate the greatest of all time, Ric Flair, but that was going to be, the calling for me. And once I got fired and I got kicked around a little bit, and Paul Heyman kind of helped me harness my energy and my focus on a promo. And then I really turned into who I am as a person on a football field or throwing a discus or on a baseball field. I just turned up my competitive spirit inside the ring in a worked sport. But when I became me and just turned up the volume, that's when I found success. And so, if I would have been back 20 years ago, I might have always been a heel my entire career. Now, and I think, well, you can tell me, I don't know why people gravitated to me or like me, but I think that I was talking so much trash. I was trying to be a bad guy, but I became wildly entertaining. You didn't know what I was going to do next. And even though I might have been breaking the rules, and I was marching to the beat of my own drum, and I wanted a championship, and I was willing to do anything and everything to get it. And then you throw Vince into the fact, into the storyline, and then it's anti-authority thing, and then I can see where the correlation comes in. But there, to me, as bad as I was, there was always an honesty and some type of integrity to the Stone Cold character. And it wasn't something I was thinking about, but that's the way it turned out to be.
Yeah, I'd definitely put you in the category of those other defining figures of the '90s and the early 2000s. The whether it's the Tony Soprano anti-hero character, or the Mike Tyson bad guy, but he handles his business, or Michael Jordan not really playing nice, but he's getting it done. And Stone Cold was definitely in that realm for sure. And I think all of that speaks to a different side that all people have, where they want to, they consider stepping outside of the bounds, or having these really grand ambitions and doing what it takes, but still operating according to a code of some kind, and a set of rules, which I think everybody can connect and relate to.
And sometimes I was making my own rules and I was breaking theirs. But the thing about it was a little bit more of the wild, wild west back in, and I wasn't afraid to push the envelope or to go out on a limb, because I knew after what had happened to me in WCW by them not thinking I was marketable, or I couldn't put the whole package together as far as the aesthetics, the work style, or whatever. But I knew I had to take chances on myself, and if I wasn't going to bet on me, no one else was either. So I put all my chips in my own basket. I bet on myself, and I took chances. Sometimes guys play it too safe, and they never go nowhere. Or sometimes they play it safe, but they're just the right package, so it all works. There's different ways to the top. A lot of times when I'm talking to people, like aggression, uh, eh, space it to some violence, energy, uh, foul mouth. That was my key. Not everybody's gonna. I can't say, hey, go do it the way I did it, because it's not going to work for everybody. This turned out to work for me. Look, the way Ric Flair did it, the way Hogan did it, like you were alluding to. There's different ways to the top, and anybody can get there, but you just got to find the right keys.
And I was going to ask you about the WCW, ECW, just those situations there, and how you use that as a jumping off point and as a motivation. So would you say that after those experiences, by the time you got to World Wrestling, it was like, you know what, I'm going all in, and this is it, and I'm doing everything I can to make sure I'm marketable, and I'm entertaining, and
No, no, it was all a work in progress. Down there,
mhm.
and, when I started in Tennessee, Dallas, and Tennessee, in the USWA, you're learning mechanics, trying to put a little psychology in there. You're not even thinking about a character, and you should be, but I wasn't. And then WCW, Dutch Mantel had given me the Stunning Steve name. That was a name. It wasn't really a character, but I was playing something, and so you know I got fired from there and go to ECW, and I started kind of having a little bit of a realization of what's going on when the promo I cut there in a hotel room about 4:30 in the morning, about 7 or 8 minutes worth, started resonating with people, and the whole room gave me a standing ovation. And these guys like Sandman, Raven, McFoley, the guys that are dropping great promos. And then I go up to WWF at the time, and I'm the ringmaster. So I still hadn't put it all together. I still don't know exactly what to do. But when the Stone Cold Steve Austin name came about, and I wanted to be from Victoria, Texas, because I used to live there, and I finally, shaved my head instead of having the Pulp Fiction inspired Bruce Willis haircut, uh, and turned into Stone Cold and grew in the goatee and put all, the whole package. I finally, after 7.5 years, was able to put the package together as far as looks, personality, work style, specifically after getting dropped on my head and have to change into a brawler. So then that's when everything really kind of started lining up. And that would, lead me to where what you were alluding to.
So that's the next thing I wanted to ask you about too, is just turning those setbacks, those losses, into wins and into advantages. Like I noticed after the injury, you transitioned to the brawling style, and then the brawling style almost became the default style in a lot of ways. So, what are some other examples of some setbacks you had that you spun to your advantage, wrestling or outside of wrestling even?
Man, I don't know about outside of wrestling, but that was the major setback, as far as pro wrestling goes. And I was trying to be a scientific wrestler, because I think that's what everybody kind of starts off at, uh, because that's the easiest way to go wrestling 101. And again, I was trying to emulate Ric Flair, and there was never going to be another Ric Flair. So, but I was starting to up the ass kicking style and up the promos before I got dropped on my head, with Owen that night at SummerSlam. So things were starting to fall into place. I think it's because of the attitude that I possessed and the way I was coming off in promos. And I wish I would have never got dropped on my head, but hell, if I hadn't, I don't know that I would have changed into the style that I turned into. So, that was definitely a setback that made me change, that helped me become more successful. And then just as far as just in life, and I've had a ton of setbacks, but the way I was raised in South Texas by my mom and dad is just hard work always pays off. And hey, maybe sometimes you're going to get something for free or get lucky, but I think most everybody. Well, put it this way: on my show, Straight Up Steve Austin, every one of the guests I've ever had, they didn't get there because they had anything handed to them. Everybody had to work their ass off, and that was the mantra, and that's what my mother and my father preached to us growing up in South Texas. Hard work pays off.
What are some of the other values and lessons learned you took away from growing up in Texas with your family?
My dad used to tell me two things. He goes, Steve, if you're going to do something, do it right the first time so you don't have to come back and do it again. And then he would always tell me, he goes, Steve, if you're going to do something, don't half ass it. Do it all the way. Don't give a half effort. If I'd have just tried half as hard, in my wrestling career or in anything I'd done, hell, I wouldn't have made nothing. So go all in. And sometimes you can take a baby step, but at some point, you got to give it everything you got, and that's what life's all about, man. You ain't here very long, so get it in while you can, but go for it. Have a goal.
Absolutely. And what about now? I'm so excited to see the show, the new season coming out. What have been some of your favorite moments from the first season, and what's some stuff you're really excited about now for this next one?
Man, every guest brings something different to the table, and every activity is so different. We filmed that pilot, 2 years ago, give or take, with Trace Adkins, and USA Network called a meeting with me, and they pitched a show. We didn't really know exactly, what it was, other than it's a show, but what's it? How does it work? And we put that pilot together, and they kicked that thing around for about a year, and I'd already written it off. I said, hell, I'm moving on to the next thing. And sure enough, right before the deadline was up, they said, we're taking this to season. We're going. We're going to green light it. And all of a sudden, man, you're in production, and then you get two or three under your belt, and you think, oh, okay, here's kind of what it is. And you roll out 8 shows, and we crushed it in the 18 to 55 male demographic. So I was really proud of that. And now based on the experience that I had last season, now and more repetition and being on the job more, now I know exactly what the show is. It's a badass talk show. It's action adventure. It's adrenaline. There's going to be some vehicles involved. There's going to be an activity involved, and my job is to highlight my guest and to get some stories out of them and let them entertain us with their road to success, some of their failures, where they came from. And I tell each guest before we go out there, I say, hey, man, if we don't have a good time hanging out today, we're doing something wrong. So I just want you to have fun. And so maybe that's this isn't, I'm not going to solve the world's problems with my show. This is designed as pure entertainment. And so, we get some great stories, and you hear some good stories of where people came from. But bottom line, man, we're just trying to entertain people, and that's what the show is. I know what it is now.
Did you have an idea of what it was going to be in the very beginning, or was it an evolution where you're kind of figuring it out as you go along? Like, okay, this is, this is what we're going to shoot for. And
I think USA Network kind of had a vision for it more so than I had because, I came from, working in live arenas, working, crowds. Now I've been in crowds of 15 people and I've been in front of crowds 90,000 people. But I'm used to working in an arena. I'm used to working people and I'm used to getting an immediate response, based on what I've done. So, go back in time, or fast forward into to this new thing, and you're having a conversation one on one, and you've got a crew of about 90 people hanging around, and it's different. It's not instant feedback. Am I getting the right story? Am I doing this right? And I'm very thankful that the USA Network has surrounded me with such a great crew because the producers on the show and the people that help me are invaluable, and they make me better than what I am. So I think we found out what the show was, and maybe they knew what it was way back in the day, but now we're in a groove. And dude, this was a tough year to film, with everything we have going on, and we got pushed for a couple of months, and it's been over a year, 2 or 3 months since we've been on the air, and we were supposed to start filming a long time ago, but we had to operate according to the guidelines mandated to us. And I'm just thankful that we got the show on the air. And I hope we find the audience that we had, a year and a half ago.
hmm and so I'm just curious, knowing everything that you know now, having gone through everything you've gone through, forklift operator, paying dues, top of wrestling, now TV, movies in between, the IPA, which is fantastic. What advice would you give to your younger self if you could go back and tell him something?
I was always a hard worker. Like I said, that's when my parents brought me up. And that's not bragging. I mean, that's just the way I was raised. We had to do our chores, and quite frankly, if you didn't do your chores, you got your ass whipped. So, you know, I have the work ethic. I guess if I was going to go back and give myself advice to the question that you asked, don't have a knee jerk reaction. Got that from my mother. Sometimes I can react a little quickly, and sometimes, when you get a piece of information, think about it, process it, and don't react so quickly. Case in point, when I was supposed to go to Atlanta and wrestle Brock Lesnar and get beat in a match. Well, when I heard it, and it's not about losing, it was just a bad business decision. But the way I reacted was to, hey, you know what? F you. That is not good business. And there had been a few things like that were kind of building blocks to that. And I just, as they said, I took my ball and went home. So that would be a knee jerk reaction. And one time I was, of all places, in the shower with Big Van Vader, Leon White, many years ago in Atlanta, Georgia. God rest his soul. And Leon was sitting on a steel chair in the shower. And he said, Steve, he goes, always let a cooler head prevail. And I wish that I had listened to his advice, which is the advice I'm telling myself, way back in the day.